It's Saturday, April 14th, 2018, 2018, 2018. And with today, it's a Saturday show. And I'm not wearing my normal getup, I am actually wearing a jersey. And why? Because we're doing my 10s, and we're going to do my 10 favorite Denver Broncos. Now, this isn't the 10 all-time greatest Denver Broncos, because what you got to remember is, I didn't watch the Broncos in the 60s and the 70s. I'm old, but I'm not quite that old. So I didn't see some of the players like Rich Tombstone Jackson, Lyle Alzado. I didn't really see Gradishar, Foley, Wright. I didn't see these guys play. I just Floyd Little. These weren't guys in my era. You're also not going to see the Three Amigos in here. I don't care how big of fan favorites they were not my favorites. Because Vance Johnson at his best was a number 2 receiver on most any other team. But the Denver's wide receiving core, pretty weak. So, yeah, he was a number 1 receiver here. Mark Jackson, also average wide receiver, not that great. He has the one, his one major memory is, catching the one football on the drive. So we're going to go through my top 10 Denver Broncos of all time. My 10. So you're basically figuring I got into the NFL when I was about 10 years old, so about 84. And I've loved it ever since. So that's where the giant basis of what I watched is basically 84 to current. So a lot of my favorite players are going to come from the last, 34 years, I guess. So we're going to start off with number 10, Ed McCaffrey. That's right, number 87, Ed McCaffrey. He played with us from 95 to 2003. He had 462 catches, 6,200 yards, and 446 touchdowns, 460. Look, my writing is so terrible. Now, I'm only doing his Denver Bronco stats. Let me also qualify this by saying that the Denver Bronco had to have played at least 3 years. So no Jerry Rice, because he was only on the team for a hiccup. In fact, I don't think he played a regular season game for us, and I don't think Tony Dorsett played more than 2 years. But Ed McCaffrey, one of my favorite moments of Ed McCaffrey was the Super Bowl where I think it was either Shannon Sharpe or Rod Smith is running down. It might have even been Terrell Davis is running down the sideline. And Ed McCaffrey plants. Just this vicious block, plants a Green Bay linebacker to the ground, and he just stands over him and points down at him. Now, these days, I think you get a taunting, a taunting foul on that one. I think it'd be an unsportsmanlike conduct, but it's just to see this little white wide receiver plant somebody in the ground, because Ed McCaffrey used to get destroyed. Because he would run over the middle and people would just level him, and he would just roll around on the ground. Oh my God, I'm broke. And then 2 plays later, he'd be back out on the field again and he'd be fine. I think it's like I don't know I think if they would have had the concussion protocol back when he was in his prime, he may not have gotten to play as many games as he did. I think he might have played his way through a lot of them, but he was a fierce competitor. He was fun to watch. Him and Rod Smith together was a great receiving tandem. I loved that Ed McCaffrey had his best years here in Denver. Number 9, Simon Fletcher. A lot of the younger Bronco fans might not remember this guy. Simon Fletcher played with us from 85 to 95. He spent his whole career in Denver. Had 97.5 sacks, and he had 808 tackles. He had a year where he had 16 sacks, and in his career, he never made a Pro Bowl. Not once. Simon Fletcher was a very good defensive end. He was very good for the Broncos. He played outside linebacker in the 3-4 defenses that Joe Collier had, which meant he was the pass rushing linebacker. He was really, really good, but he never made a Pro Bowl. I don't have any real memorable moments of Simon Fletcher. All I remember is that he never made a Pro Bowl, and he was always so consistently good. And the fact that he had, in about 10 years, 97.5 sacks, meant the guy averaged double digits in sacks every year. So not quite double digits, but he was really good. His first year, he only had 1 sack. Then he had a 5-year period where he had almost 60. So he was really, really good. He was just so quiet and reserved. He just wasn't boisterous enough, and really didn't promote himself very well, which was sad because he is a great linebacker, one of the most underrated linebackers. Even in Bronco history, people forget about him. People remember Gradishar. People remember, of course, they know Von Miller. But sometimes we forget, and we talk about Neil Smith, who I'm more of a defensive end, I guess, and Alfred Williams and things like that, and he might have been more of a defensive end as well. But for pass rushers, for Denver Bronco pass rushers, Simon Fletcher is really good, and it's a shame that nobody really remembers him. Number 8, Carl Mecklenburg. Now, he played 83 to 94, also played his whole career in Denver. He had 79 sacks. Now, the reason that is significant is because he was a middle linebacker. Middle linebackers aren't sack guys usually. Middle linebackers are usually the chiefs of your offense. They're usually the shot callers. They're usually calling the play for at least for the front 7. They're calling out what needs to be done. And so they kind of roam around, and they're more run stoppers. But he had almost 80 sacks as a middle linebacker. Yeah, he had 1,100 tackles, not in the Hall of Fame either, but to me, he's also another underrated. I think he's every bit as good as Urlacher, if you really want to compare him to somebody. But I think Urlacher might make the Hall of Fame someday, and I think Carl Mecklenburg should be there, because a middle linebacker in the 80s and early 90s, getting all those sacks, that was pretty good. And Mecklenburg was he was a 12th round pick out of the University of Minnesota, and had that career as a 12th round pick. And I actually got to meet Carl Mecklenburg. I was at the Denver Auto Show, and I actually got to meet Carl Mecklenburg. He was looking at the Lincolns, and I go, I think that's Carl Mecklenburg. And it's so awkward, because it's just like, oh, excuse me, are you Carl Mecklenburg? He goes, yes. Can I get a picture with you? Okay. That's it. That's all I said to him. But he was he took the picture with me. It was cool. So it was, thank you, Carl. Thank you, Mr. Mecklenburg. Appreciate it. I'm sure he doesn't watch this, but it's like, he was awesome. Number 7, Jake the Snake Plummer. He only played 4 years in Denver, but they were a fun 4 years. Jake Plummer was a fun quarterback. Jake Plummer for us had about 11,000 yards passing, 71 touchdowns, 41 interceptions. Or 47 interceptions, I think he had. But my Jake Plummer moment, and it's a bad moment, but it's funny as hell. Jake Plummer is standing down in the end zone. His own end zone, he's standing in it. The scrimmage play happened from the 8-yard line. He drops back to throw. He's being pressured. He's standing in our end zone, and he decides, I'm going to get rid of the football. And he's a right-handed quarterback, and he decides to pooch the ball left-handed. He just kind of does this with the football. Just a little shot put, throws it directly to a Kansas City Chief linebacker who easily walks into the end zone and scores a touchdown. I mean, it was a bad moment at the time, but I look back on it and I go, that was the decision-making of Jake Plummer sometimes. Sometimes he was great, but sometimes he would just make those plays and go, oh, what were you thinking? Why would you do that? But you look back on it and it's hilarious to think that this was an NFL quarterback who thought in that moment, I should throw the ball left-handed into the middle of the field where none of my players are. Brilliant. Then I'll prevent the safety. Oh, they scored a touchdown. So, Jake Plummer, awesome. Number 5, this one will get a little bit of a quiz. John Elway. Now, I love John Elway, but he's not my favorite Denver Bronco of all time. He's done way more for the franchise than any other Denver Bronco in history, but he was never my favorite Denver Bronco. I never could really identify with the blonde hair, blue-eyed, good-looking guy with the cheerleader wife and the millions of dollars. Somehow I don't identify with that very well. But, I mean, for his career, he played with us from 83 I forgot number 6, Champ Bailey. I'm sorry, Champ. Let's go to number 6 and do Champ Bailey real quick. Number 6, Champ Bailey. Played with us from '04 to 2013. He had 34 interceptions, 3 touchdowns, 2 sacks, 502 tackles. Two of, it's like, Champ Bailey, sadly what I don't remember, the thing I remember about it the most was when his career started to go downhill. And I wanted him to play for the Broncos longer, but he wouldn't go to safety, where I think he could have extended his career by another 3 or 4 years. Charles Woodson extended his career by going to safety. He became one of the best safeties. I think Champ Bailey could have done the same thing. Champ Bailey had lost a step. He used to be a shutdown corner. I wanted so bad for that guy to get a Super Bowl. He deserved a Super Bowl. He was a class act, good teammate, good citizen. He never got his Super Bowl. He came to us in '04, which was a few years after we won our Super Bowls, and he left us in 13, a couple years before we won our next Super Bowl. He just fell into the worst section. But Champ Bailey was always a class act, and he was a great player for the Denver Broncos. So it's kind of sad that he never got a Super Bowl ring. John Elway. Yeah, we'll go back to number 5 now, John Elway. Once again, already know the little thing that I said earlier, but he had 51,000 yards throwing, passing. He had 300 touchdowns total. 300 touchdowns total and 226 interceptions. That's a lot. But John Elway was a little bit of a gunslinger, especially in his young age. John had such a strong arm. He could just sling that thing so hard. People used to talk about the Elway cross, which is the little cross in the football. It would leave an imprint in your chest. It was a joke, of course, but they say that's how hard he threw it. So it was always cool. It's like, that was kind of as a wide receiver, that was your initiation, was getting the Elway cross, because he threw the ball so hard. And I remember his early years. I do. His early years, he used to throw the ball really, really, really hard. And I remember so many times going, John, quit throwing at their feet. Quit throwing at their feet, John. I mean, you're throwing the ball super hard, and he's just rocketing it right to the ground, and nobody can catch it. Later made up for it, of course, by winning 2 Super Bowls. Of course, the 2 major memorable moments. One is the drive. I still remember my dad. I went, me and my friends, we were outside. It was a pretty nice day in January for Colorado. So we were outside just playing, having a good time. And I remember hearing my dad just screaming at the top of his lungs in the house. And then we were at least a good 400 or 500 feet away from the house. I mean, we were more than a football field away from this thing. And I remember just hearing my dad going nuts. And I'm going, what's going on in there? And I mean, this is not with windows open or doors open. Everything was shut, and you could hear him outside of the house 500 feet away. That's how loud he was yelling. He was super excited. So I went rushing back in. It's like, what happened? And that's the sad part. I did not watch the drive live. I've always seen the drive. I mean, my dad recorded it on VHS, so I got to watch. I watched it as, VHS, that's right. So I watched the drive that way, but just hearing my dad screaming, and we, of course, we're going to our first Super Bowl. And the drive was amazing. And Cleveland is, they've gone the drive, the fumble. I think they had 2 other things that were bad. I know they had the departure or whatever when LeBron left. But John had that moment. Of course, the drive is considered one of the greatest, moments in NFL history, along with his little helicopter in the Super Bowl. This old man wanted that Super Bowl real bad, and of course he ran for the first down, did the helicopter in the air, and landed. So these are 2 great moments from John Elway. Not to mention, he's now the general manager of the Broncos. He's built a Super Bowl champ, and he's built a team that went to the Super Bowl. So in his short tenure, he has gotten us 1 more Super Bowl win and gotten us another Super Bowl appearance. And now, of course, now he's trying to find us another quarterback, isn't he? John, find us someone, please. Or you're going to have to come out of retirement. So number 4, we're going to try not to skip over anything anymore. We're not going to go from 7 to 5 to 6 back to 5. Let's go number 4. Let's go a legitimate number 4. Terrell Davis. Terrell Davis was awesome. Terrell Davis to me is still one of the best running backs in NFL history. His career was shortened by a major knee injury. He had tore his ACL, messed up his knee bad. And it was the year after I think it was the year after Elway retired. Tore up his knee and he was never the same. He tried to come back, but he never was the same guy. He played with us for 95 to 2001. He only had a 7-year career, and he only really had 4 or 5 real good years before he got hurt. Rushed for 7,600 yards, had 1,280 yards receiving. So, I mean, he almost had 9,000 total yards. He had 65 total touchdowns. Now, he's another one of our Hall of Famers. John Elway's a Hall of Famer. Terrell Davis is a Hall of Famer. John was our first Hall of Famer, and that was a big, big deal. Terrell Davis was not. I think Sharp and Floyd Little got in before Terrell. But Terrell Davis, he had a 2,000-yard season. He was a Super Bowl MVP. He was a league MVP. Such a great running back. He was pretty fast for as big as he was. He was strong, hard to bring down. Terrell Davis, to me, he's definitely the all-time greatest Bronco, and in my opinion, he's in the top 5 running backs of all time. I know the numbers don't prove it, but if you were in Denver and you got to watch Terrell Davis, you really understood this kid was special. And rightfully, and I'm glad that the Hall of Fame voters recognized it as well, that he was a special player. He didn't play as many years, but he was a special player. If he would have played another 5 years, he would have easily had, 12, 13,000 yards rushing. And he would have been a first ballot Hall of Famer at that point. He should have been anyway. Number 3 for me, Von Miller. Von is a beast. Love Von Miller. Von Miller is he is definitely one of the greatest. He's definitely, in my opinion, the greatest linebacker for the Denver Broncos. And his career's not done. He's already, in his short tenure, 7 years, he already has 83.5 sacks. 83.5 sacks. If he plays 2 more years, he'll easily pass Simon Fletcher, who I think is the Broncos' all-time leader in sacks. So, Von Miller, if he keeps this up, he's definitely a first ballot Hall of Famer. He plays so fast, and he gets better every year. He learns more and more of the game, and he makes himself better. Whereas in his first couple of years, all he could really do was pass rush. And I still remember he would go on these big sweeping wide things, and the left tackle would try to run out there with him. Well, of course, when the offenses learned that, all they would do is they would, every time Vaughn would start to run up the field to go get the quarterback, they would just hand off the ball, and the running back would go where Von Miller used to be. And they would gain giant chunks of yards. But Von Miller learned how to spin right back. If he was going to do one of those big sweeps and he saw it was a run play, he would just spin back under the other way and get the running back. So they had to adjust how you are always having to adjust to Von Miller. Of course, my big moment for Von Miller is that Super Bowl. That Super Bowl 50, when he stripped the ball from Cam Newton, stripped the ball, and Malik Jackson recovered it in the end zone. And Von Miller spent the entire day terrorizing Cam Newton. And he's just he terrorizes Tom Brady, he terrorizes just about any quarterback he goes up against. You have to put a lot of people on Von Miller. And I'm glad he's a Bronco. He did have the one season where he was injured for a whole season. Then he had the little problem where he got suspended for 4 games. But he seems to have learned his lessons. So he's done a couple of bad things, but he's been spot on since. So he learns from his mistakes and becomes better because of them. Number 2, Shannon Sharpe. I know this might not be the most conventional pick in the world for the second best player, but Shannon Sharpe, he was one of my favorite players. I could identify with a tight end because I am not that fast. I am not, I'd be used more as a blocking guy than he was, of course, because he was a great receiver. But I can identify with a tight end a little bit more. Now, he played with us from 90 to 2003. He had a couple of years where he played in Baltimore. But in his years with us, he had 675 catches, 8,439 yards, 55 touchdowns, and he's a Hall of Famer. He went to Baltimore for a couple years because we wouldn't re-sign him. Then he came back to Denver, which I love seeing. He got to retire a Bronco and even played a couple more years with us before he did retire, which was awesome. Most memorable moment of Shannon Sharpe, when he pissed off Derek Thomas. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I'm watching that going, and I'm going, what does Derek Thomas do? Derek Thomas is one of the most mellow guys I've ever seen on the field. You never see him get goaded into something like that. And Shannon made him just wig out. And he had like 3 personal fouls against him, unsportsmanlike conducts. And Shannon Sharpe probably just laughing. And it's the one moment that Derek Thomas really lost his cool, and it was against Shannon Sharpe. And I'm going, if Shannon Sharpe can piss off Derek Thomas, he can piss off anybody. I'm going to give a little bit of an honorable mention before I move on. I'm going to give a little bit of an honorable mention to another Denver Bronco. He doesn't fit the criteria, but it's a guy that I actually know. His name is Cyron Brown. Now, he actually has a Super Bowl ring, and he's worked with me where I worked, which I thought, holy crap, this guy is a former Denver Bronco. But he is the most genuine, one of the nicest guys I've ever met in my life. This guy's like 6'7", 235, 240. He's a big dude. Super nice, super polite, good-hearted, funny. I love the fact that I can say I know this guy. We worked together, and I got to talk to him and laugh with him. And I remember one day where my most memorable moment with Cyron was he came up to me one day and he just hands me something and puts it in my hand, and I'm just going, well, what the heck? Oh my God, that's a Super Bowl ring. He put a Super Bowl ring right into my hand to let me see it. He just handed it to me. Just handed it, and I'm looking, I'm going, oh, it's a Super Bowl ring. And you don't realize, and I don't think he really realizes how big of a thrill that is for a Bronco fan to be able to hold that piece of memorabilia. A Super Bowl ring, from your favorite team. That is a big deal for a Bronco fan. Probably any fan of an NFL franchise who loves their team would love to hold a Super Bowl ring in their hand. And we're not talking, this is not a front office ring. This is not a thanks for showing up ring. This was a player's ring. So it was super cool. This was not a chintzy little tiny junk ring. This was a genuine Super Bowl player's ring, and it was awesome. And Cyron, he's one of the most genuine, nicest people, and that's what he always wants people to know. It's like, just because you played in the NFL doesn't mean you're rich. Because most NFL's players are only 3 years or less, and you don't make a ton of money. And so he has to work just like the rest of us do. And he's a very humble guy, and he's a good guy. And it's nice to know that something like that didn't go to his head. He was just, he's just Cyron. He's just fun to be around. So that's kind of my honorable mention. He doesn't meet quite the criteria, but if he had 3 years of NFL service for the Denver Broncos, where he actually played all 3 years, it's like he'd definitely be number one. And that's why I talk about him more than anybody else on this list, is because I get to say I know him. So, and he's a good guy. So that's just a little shout out to you, Cyron. I know he probably doesn't know I make these videos, but if anybody ever stumbles onto it. But my number one player of all time, Steve Atwater. That's right. That's the guy's jersey that I'm wearing right now. Steve Atwater, the smiling assassin. I love that nickname. Steve Atwater played most of his career. He did play 1 year with the Jets. The Broncos let him go. He played 1 year with the Jets. It didn't go so well. But he played with Denver from 89 to 98. We drafted him in the first round out of the University of Arkansas at number 20. And he should be a Hall of Famer, but he's not. Unfortunately, he has not made the Hall of Fame. And he should be. He has 24 interceptions. He has 1,038 tackles. And he has one of the, in fact, if I had to say what's the most memorable play in NFL history for me, it is when Atwater comes up and blasts Christian Okoye. Because up until then, the Nigerian Nightmare had never had his bell rung. He had never been sent back like that. Okoye used to run people over. Atwater destroyed him and just sent him backwards. And it's still, in my opinion, the most memorable play in NFL history. I know there's bigger plays than that, but for me, I love watching that play over and over again. I could watch it on a loop. He also has the play where he knocks out himself and two other players in the Super Bowl. Atwater was a hard hitter. And I mean, that was he was a great tackler, hard hitter. Not necessarily, he wasn't a cover safety. No, he didn't cover people. He was a run stopping safety for the most part. And he hit people, hit them hard. So yeah, Steve Atwater was always one of my favorites. I loved Steve Atwater. He's one of my favorite all-time NFL players, period. I mean, he really is. Steve Atwater's great. A buddy of mine gave me a signed football helmet from Atwater. I have this jersey. Atwater's awesome. So this video has been real long, and it's going to... So, I guess I'm just going to cut it short here. So, if you're not a Denver Bronco fan, this list is going to mean absolutely nothing to you. But Denver's my favorite. The Broncos are my favorite team. So with all that being said, to the troops, past, present, and future, thanks for the freedom.